it looked really, really bad. So that's one thing, logic versus emotivism. And it kind of reminded me of these debates that William Lane Craig used to have with some of these really crappy opponents a few years ago, where he was making certain arguments using objective morality and just giving the broader picture, theological picture, and in response it was just trigger words. It's just like, oh, this and that. So logic versus emotivism, that's one of the things that really stood out. There were some things in which he shot himself in the foot where he didn't need to. So, for example, calling and knowing that actually Daniel had set up this trap, and then he still walked into it, which is that Daniel was explaining about liberals taking on cultures, traditional cultures, and wiping them out, killing them, destroying them, generating famines, and this has killed millions of people. Thank you for coming back, Yusuf. I was just about to make a point in which getting your input would be good. So there was a point at which Daniel was mentioning about how liberals went around the world destroying these supposed traditional and primitive cultures. And then, Snailton did something which was absolutely unneeded, which is that he called these cultures primitive. And he was very forceful in calling them primitive. And obviously, the implications are quite clear here, that these are cultures that essentially need to be wiped out.
No, what he meant is that primitive cultures that do not respect human rights should be civilized and accept human rights. Human rights are basic, common, sensible moral rules that relate to the human condition. In other words, human physiology and how that relates to the natural world. They are not totalitarian. Hindus, for example, can still be Hindus without burning people in funerals. You can still be Muslim with all your traditions without executing gays. It has nothing to do with culture. In contrast, Islam with offensive jihad truly erases cultures and civilizations. Islam is supremacist, totalitarian, and it demonizes everything other than Islam. It means to erase all other ways of life and all other ideologies and philosophies other than Islam. In contrast, human rights just prohibits inhumane barbarity. It's universal and it sets to preserve cultures. That's the reason Daniel Haqiqatjou, as we speak, is making YouTube videos in USA. And anti-Islamic YouTubers are being prosecuted, as we speak, in most of the Muslim world. Only brain-dead Islamist propagandists can make this claim, that Islam preserves cultures and human rights erases cultures. It's absolute insanity, this argument.
And even though, liberals may say, no, that's not right, we don't agree with that. Well, that's what they did. And they still today would call those cultures primitive. And those cultures obviously have traditional values, patriarchal values. They have gender roles. They have what you would call toxic masculinity.
Subboor, you are dreadful in logic, my friend. I doubt if in your life you said a true argument. You are simply an idiot, my friend. That's the simple truth. You are dreadful in logic. Now, in liberal countries, masculinity or gender rights are not prohibited. You can still have a traditional family structure in the West if you choose to. What human rights are prohibiting is the criminal behavior of Muslim men enslaving, abusing, degrading, raping, and subjugating women. Okay, stop doing strawmans. What you think in your psychotic delusion, what you consider as fact in your psychotic delusion are not facts, Subboor Ahmed. Okay, but as you brought up now the example of marriage and family and so on. Let's see the behavior of your prophet. Prophet Mohammed, according to authentic hadith, cheated on his wives by having sex with his sex slave in their bedroom. After his wives found out and were nagging him, he promised to not do that again. Then he felt horny again, and Allah stepped up with the Quranic revelation. O Prophet, why do you prohibit what God has permitted for you? In other words, to have sex with your sex slave. Seeking to please your wives. God is forgiving and merciful. God has decreed to you the dissolution of your oath. In other words, God allows you to take back your oath and continue to have sex with your sex slave in the bedroom of your wives. God is your master. He is the all-knowing, the most wise. Now, here is where God has dyslexia, but let's read that. The prophet told something in confidence to one of his wives, but when he disclosed it and God made it known to him, he communicated part of it and he avoided another part. Then, when he informed her of it, she said, "Who informed you of this?" He said, "The all-knowing, the all-informed informed me." Okay. Then, if you repent to God, then your hearts have listened. But if you band together against him, then God is his ally, as is Gabriel and the righteous of the believers. In addition, the angels will assist him. So, Muhammad has a problem with his wives, nagging him after they caught him cheating on them. And God is his ally, and Gabriel and the righteous believers. God wasn't enough to be his ally. Look, guys, look now the stupidity. God, who said nothing in World War II, he was so upset to help Muhammad against his wives when caught him cheating on them. He was so upset that they were nagging Muhammad. He felt that he wasn't enough to protect him. And he invoked also Gabriel. I am God. Gabriel, come help me against these two poor wives. And bring all the angels. And bring all the believers. And look now what it comes next. Perhaps if he divorces you, his Lord will give him in exchange wives better than you. Submissive, believing, obedient, penitent, devout, fasting, previous married or virgins. Okay, and that is the chauvinistic insanity of Islamic scriptures. That is chauvinistic insanity. It humiliates women as far as it can possibly go. Okay. When women caught their husband having sex with his sex slaves in their bedroom, they cannot even complain because that makes Allah angry. Okay, and that is the complete humiliation Islam inflicts to women. Complete humiliation, guys. And Haqiqatjou and Ahmed Subboor had the audacity to say that Islam helps marriage and protects families. Okay.
Men are in charge of women by what Allah has given one over the other and what they spend from their wealth. So righteous women are devotedly obedient, guarding in absence what Allah would have them guard. But those whom you fear arrogance, advise them, forsake them in bed, and strike them. But if they obey you, seek no means against them. Indeed, Allah is ever exalted and grand.
الضرب دي شبهة خطيرة جدا.
نعم.
واحدة معانا مولانا.
أقول إن الله كرم المرأة بهذه العقوبة، عقوبة الضرب. كيف؟
كرمها بالضرب؟
اي والله.
مش معقول. كيف؟
قال نبينا صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وسلم: ولا تضرب الوجه
الله
ولا تقبح. شوف، كرمها. إن ضربها لا يضربها على وجهها، حتى وهو يضربها لا يسبها ولا يشتمها. عجيب. إذن هو يضرب للتأديب، وإذا ضرب لا يزيد عن 10، وإذا ضرب لا يكسر عظما ولا يقطع لحما ولا يكسر سنا ولا يفقأ عينا. أدب عند الضرب. إذا ضرب عند التأديب لا يرفع يده إلى أعلى بل يضربها بحذاء صدره. كل هذا تكريم للمرأة، هي تحتاج إلى تأديب.
Women, you heard it. It's your honor when you are being beaten. In fact, Haqiqatjou made an argument in his debate that you might even like that. Because you like men who are, men-like, and they beat you. So, it's your honor, in other words. That is Islam, guys. And remember, that is the religion that will save marriage and family. That was their argument. Okay.
When and this is something, when I was on a live stream with Hijab, we were talking about how new atheism produces simps, and it produces cucks, and it produces people who range on a scale of masculinity, which just goes from maybe simps to BTS, the Korean pop band. Like, people with it's almost like being a new atheist is going to lower your testosterone, increase your estrogen, and really just make you really and Islam produces lions, right? So this thing about primitive cultures and the way that he called them primitive. Sorry, he was calling these cultures primitive, but we would obviously say that these are the traditional cultures which have existed throughout human history.
No, that's again your delusion, Subboor. You again base your arguments on wrong premises. Polygamy was not the norm of the human species. Even animals have one partner. You idiot. Go see documentaries of, let's say, penguins. Even animals have one partner. They are devout to one partner. You idiot. Also, child marriages was not the norm in human history, Subboor. Even animals don't mate with children, with young ones. Even animals, my friend, they see a young animal and they don't want to mate with it. Child marriages was not the norm in human history. Also, forced marriages are not the norm in human history. People were always falling in love. That's why nature installed this feeling to humans, to mate. You see a beautiful woman, you fall in love. That is the norm, you idiot, you imbecile. That is from nature, my friend. Why we have love, you idiot? Why we have love? Why? To suppress it. That's why we have love, to suppress it. Then is that the norm against our human nature? Also, patriarchy in the extreme sense, like in Islam, was again not the norm in human history. So, Subboor Ahmed, like the idiot that you are, you keep basing your arguments on wrong premises.
Right? So this thing about primitive cultures and the way that he called them primitive. Sorry, he was calling these cultures primitive, but we would obviously say that these are the traditional cultures which have existed throughout human history, and you have no right to actually call these cultures primitive. What do you think about this?
Primitive implies that there is an objective advancement on the human state from worse to better. How we define better, relating to the human condition in this world, our physiology in relation to nature. The same way someone can be better pianist, the same way someone can have better morals. Cultural relativism is wrong. There are superior and inferior cultures. not relating to dress codes, but relating to their alignment to objective morality.
Okay, this was just odd when he said, I don't accept your data, I don't accept your evidence, your stats and whatnot. Okay, there's a few problems with this. When you're having a debate and you're having a debate about a topic in which you should know that these stats are going to come up because these are frequently used by not only Daniel Haqiqatjou, Jordan Peterson and others, this is general stuff. So you should know that these things exist. So if someone just does hand waving and says, well, I don't accept them, there's a few problems with this. Number one, if you don't accept them, then what do you accept? And can you actually provide that? And if you cannot provide that, you can't just simply hand wave and say, I don't accept this.
Subboor, the biggest issue with Muslim apologists and their argument is, as I said in the beginning, is their analysis of the data. And also they base the premises, in other words. Okay, so I was right. Haqiqatjou gave some statistic about, let's say, there is a huge wealth discrepancy between liberal countries. Okay, that's true. How then he tried to make sense of this discrepancy is the problem. He then gave statistics about divorced couples in the West in contrast with the fertility rates in the Muslim world. Okay, that's the facts. How then he analyzed this data was completely unwarranted. He cannot analyze objectively the data. His analysis is biased. He misses things. Okay, he jumps to unwarranted conclusions. That's the problem, Subboor. Let me give you an example. He says there is a huge fertility in the Muslim world. They make many babies. What that means? That means that makes good families? No. That means that because you make women birth-bearing machines, they give birth to more babies. What that means? That's good for the family.
And if you've heard those and you're saying you don't accept this, that means that you only heard them in the debate, and prior to the debate, you don't know about them. Therefore, you haven't actually prepared for the debate. Look, guys, when you prepare for a debate, it is serious stuff. You can't just turn up one day, right, guys, I'm going to have a debate with this guy. I'm just going to smash him. And
the debate was human rights against Sharia. And according to Subboor, offensive jihad, slavery, and violence are side issues. What is important are the mental farts of Haqiqatjou about Sharia helps fertility, blaming colonialization to human rights, and the world has strong countries and weak countries. Those are the important.
You know, here is the Botswana question, here's the balance question, here's the colonization question. Okay, what is your response? You know, this is my argument, this is why I think is valid, blah, blah, blah. Here are my stats, here's my evidence, whatnot. And in response, it was like, oh, jihad, slavery, violence, women's rights.
Subboor, you complete idiot. First of all, we know that you are mentally retarded. Okay, that's why you are an Islamist. Okay, so we have as a standard that you are mentally challenged. Okay, guys, if these guys had the common sense to understand basic stuff, they wouldn't have been Islamists in the first place. So from starters, we know that these people are mentally challenged. That's a fact, guys. You idiot. In a debate, human rights versus Sharia, what is important is jihad, slavery, and things like that. The mental farts of Haqiqatjou about fertility are not main issues, are not important, my friend. First of all, fertility, you idiot, demonstrates how you suppress women. It's a sign of disintegration. Uncivilized countries have high fertility. Okay, Subboor Ahmed. Fertility doesn't mean well-being. Okay, if I enslave one woman in my basement and I rape her every day and I make 20 kids, although I have no money to support them or send them to school. That doesn't mean this family is functional. Okay. In either way, that issue is very side issue. The other issue of colonialization, you said that human rights brings colonialism. Are you insane? Are you insane? Okay, just because West had colonialism, that doesn't mean human rights brought colonialism. In fact, human rights are against colonialism, in contradiction to Daniel Haqiqatjou, who supports offensive jihad. So the colonialist argument is against you again. Haqiqatjou wants to enslave the world and impose to others Islamic supremacy, not human rights. Human rights, in fact, does the opposite. And what was the last argument he made? Blaming human rights for the natural state of the world. Because some countries are strong and some others are weak, that means human rights is to blame. Those are the arguments. That are the serious arguments. Jihad, slavery, violence, barbarity, women's rights, all this stuff are irrelevant. We just need to focus to the mental farts of Haqiqatjou. Why? Why we need to focus on 3 mental farts of Haqiqatjou and not to the other stuff? Why? Who is Haqiqatjou? He defines what we should focus on. So he made 3 arguments. We all need to focus on those 3 arguments and forget all the rest. Jihad is irrelevant, Subboor? Jihad irrelevant. Slavery irrelevant, What's slavery? Nothing.
you love these, bro.
No, and he's talking to him with like it's like he's talking to him with authority as well.
Yeah.
He was talking to him with authority, like as if he had gravitas.
Yeah.
He had something going on.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was
a mismatch.
It was a mismatch. It was a mismatch, but you'd expect more resistance, even if it was a mismatch.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What look at this. I mean, at one point, they were talking about human rights and whatever, yeah? And then he started talking about
snails.
He started talking, no, forget that. He started mentioning theological issues.
Oh, yeah.
It's like if God did an naskh, like, what's that got to do with it?
Not only.
Let me explain what that has to do with this. Okay. The level of conviction Islam demands doesn't meet the evidence it provides. So, when you demand a totalitarian dictatorship, and your evidence is what Sultan shows, your Prophet Muhammad making things up on the fly, okay, there is a discrepancy. You demand total submission of all aspects of life in a seemingly moral cult. You demand a total dictatorship, you idiot. And your evidence are fairy tales for children. That's very relevant, Mohammed Hijab. Okay. So that was all the essence of the debate. Sultan didn't even have to do anything else.
That, look, what he needs to realize, and again, we were talking about philosophy, he doesn't understand the basics. Someone can just turn around, literally give him a foot slap and say, well, from a pragmatic point of view, it doesn't matter whether you believe in objectivity or subjectivity. Purely pragmatically, we can talk about liberalism versus Sharia, liberalism versus Islam, even if morality didn't exist.
He didn't, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
pragmatism. He didn't deal with anything. He didn't deal with, like,
I was saying he could be a Muslim pretending to be an atheist, make atheism look bad.
Come on, like, if I were him, and I didn't know any of the statistics.
Yeah, why are you assuming his gender?
If I were him, I didn't know any of the statistics, right? Of any of the things that Haqiqatjou came with.
Yeah.
But I was confronted with them. I say, look, I'd have to say, how are we sure that these things are representative? Any social science has, like, even Pew, yeah, it's the gold standard for he mentioned Pew. But Pew has problems, like has serious problems, methodological problems, right? Like, for example, that whole thing of apostates, 23% of American Muslims are apostates, was a study that was conducted with 1,000 people.
Yeah.
And like 60% of them or something like that, a big chunk were Iranians or something, you know, or from
Yeah.
this is a flawed statistic. And if you look at, for example, and there were people that required translators as well. In fact, that's why when they did the British attitude surveys in this country, show much. In fact, they state.
Okay, guys, this video takes forever. I will make I cannot remember now the number. A next video exposing this fool. Your arguments are why I'm making videos, because your arguments are dreadful, stupid, childish, funny. Your arguments are funny. This guy just admitted a couple of seconds ago that morality is not related to real things in the real world. Okay, and I said, I cannot stop the video every 3 seconds for these idiots. Okay, so you are reaching a level that you are boring me, my friend. You are boring me. Okay, and I let things go. Okay, never mind. Let's go. Let's continue. Okay, so I will do a next video responding to Mohammed Hijab.
Theological.